The mistaken message. The tiny apartment was silent except for the soft whimpers of Emma's baby, nestled in a worn bassinet beside the couch. The faint glow of a single lamp illuminated stacks of overdue bills scattered across the coffee table. Empty cereal boxes and crumpled receipts littered the floor like forgotten memories. Emma rubbed her temples, trying to hold back the panic clawing at her chest. She had been running on 3 hours of sleep and the constant anxiety of wondering how she would get by today or tomorrow. Her baby, little Noah, fussed again, his tiny hands reaching out for something he couldn't yet name. Emma had been awake most of the night, rocking him back to sleep after he refused the watery formula she could barely afford. She scrolled through her phone, desperately checking online stores, coupons, anything that could help stretch the last of her paycheck. Her battery was dangerously low, blinking red with a warning she couldn't ignore. She took a shaky breath, typing with fingers that trembled from exhaustion and stress. I hate to ask, but we really need formula. I don't know what else to do. If you can help, I would be so grateful. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the send button. She had memorized a friend's number earlier, and now, in her panicked fog, she pressed send without double-checking. The phone buzzed almost immediately. Emma stared at the screen, heart hammering. Please, please, she whispered to herself, even though she had no idea if anyone would respond. Darkness pressed against the windows like a suffocating weight. The electricity bill was past due. The lights in the hallway outside flickered and buzzed, a reminder of how thinly stretched everything was.
Her phone buzzed again.
This time, it wasn't a generic notification.
It was a reply.
Excuse me? Emma blinked at the screen. It wasn't the friendly text from her neighbor or the understanding voice of her sister. Whoever this was, they were confused. Panic surged anew as she realized she might have sent the message to the wrong number. Before she could send a correction, another text arrived. Who is this? And why are you asking for formula from me? Emma's stomach dropped. She frantically scrolled through her contacts, realizing with growing horror that the number she had entered belonged to someone she didn't know at all. She almost dropped the phone. I'm so sorry. I thought this was, she typed, her fingers shaking. But before she could finish, her phone blinked red again. Low battery. She cursed under her breath, praying it would hold long enough for some kind of response. On the other side of the city, in a high-rise office that glittered with glass and polished steel, the phone buzzed on an immaculate desk. James Carlton, billionaire entrepreneur and owner of multiple tech companies, frowned at the screen. He was reviewing quarterly reports, his coffee untouched, when he saw the message. I hate to ask, but we really need formula. I don't know what else to do. If you can help, I would be so grateful. James blinked, setting down his pen. He leaned back in his leather chair, eyes narrowing. The sender was unfamiliar, and yet the tone, so raw, so desperate, was impossible to ignore. He tapped the screen again, scrolling back up to reread the tiny plea. He exhaled sharply. Billionaire or not, he had never received a text like this before. His assistant's number, his team's numbers, none of them. Just this one stranger reaching out for help. Another buzz. The follow-up text appeared. I'm so sorry. I thought this was... James sat back, fingers steepled. Confusion swirled into a strange mix of irritation and curiosity. Who sends a personal plea like this to a complete stranger? And why him, of all people? He tapped his phone to respond, but no words came. He was both shocked and slightly annoyed, unsure if he should laugh, ignore it, or call security. Yet somewhere deep down, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a tug of interest, a sense that this was not just another scam or a random message. Emma's tiny mistake had crossed a boundary neither of them could have anticipated. And in that fleeting, tense moment, both lives teetered on the brink of a connection neither was ready for, but one that might change everything. James Carlton stared at the screen, his brow furrowed. At first glance, it had to be a scam. Billionaires were used to random messages, pleas for charity, clever phishing attempts, or worse, fake sob stories designed to manipulate. His instincts screamed to delete, to ignore, to go back to the comfort of spreadsheets and schedules. But something about the text made him hesitate. It wasn't polished or rehearsed. It wasn't trying to impress or flatter. It was raw, desperate, human. He shook his head, leaning back in his chair. Annoyance prickled at his nerves. Who sends a personal plea to a total stranger? Yet beneath the irritation, he felt a flicker of something. A memory he couldn't place, a tug at a corner of his mind that made his chest tighten. He sipped his now-cold coffee and stared at the phone again, unwilling to look away. Meanwhile, across town, Emma sat on the edge of her couch, cradling Noah as he cried. Her phone vibrated once more, and she almost dropped it, startled by the sudden hope it brought. She glanced down, squinting at the screen. All right, let's get a few things straight.
Who are you?
And why should I believe this isn't some scam? Her fingers trembled as she typed, every word soaked in exhaustion and fear. My name is Emma. I'm a single mom. I work 2 jobs and still can't make enough. The formula, I have no money. I thought I was texting my friend. I'm not trying to scam anyone, I promise. I just don't know what else to do. She pressed send before second-guessing herself. Her heart pounded as she held Noah closer, his soft cries mixing with her rapid breathing. The apartment felt smaller somehow, the walls closing in, yet there was that faint thread of hope now stretching between her and the stranger on the other side of the city. James read her reply carefully. He wasn't used to this. People usually spoke in polished sentences or begged with rehearsed words. But this was real. The honesty in every line tugged at something buried deep in him. He remembered his sister, long gone, struggling alone when they were younger. The helplessness she must have felt, the sleepless nights, the constant worry about basics, suddenly became vivid. A memory long buried, and he hated that it had resurfaced. He typed back, sharper than he meant to. How old is the baby? How much formula do you need? And why don't you go to a food bank or a local charity? Emma's fingers shook as she responded. He's 6 months. I've been to every charity in the area. They can only give so much, and it's never enough. I need a little help this week. I don't expect anything more. James paused, staring at the screen. Her honesty burned through the skepticism he had built like armor. There was no embellishment, no exaggeration. Just a mother trying to survive, trying to feed her child. He inhaled, feeling the tug of responsibility mixed with a strange, unfamiliar warmth. Fine, he typed finally, more to himself than to her. I'll help. Just this once. I don't usually do this, but all right. Emma didn't respond immediately. She clutched Noah, feeling tears prick her eyes, unsure if she had read it correctly. Just this once. That was all she needed. Relief and disbelief warred within her chest, her mind spinning with the reality that a stranger, no, a billionaire stranger, was willing to step into her life, if only for a moment. James stood, pulling on a jacket. He didn't usually do personal visits, and yet something in the way she had written, the way life had hardened her so young, compelled him. He drove through the quiet streets, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. Thoughts whirled. Was this wise? Was it safe? But the memory of that helpless little girl, his sister, kept him moving forward. Emma paced her small living room, listening to Noah's cries. Every minute felt stretched, every second heavy with anticipation. She didn't know if he was real, or if this was some cruel trick of her imagination. And then there was a knock at the door. Her breath caught. She froze. James Carlton stood there, tall and impossibly composed, yet with eyes that betrayed curiosity and a strange softness. The city outside felt distant, almost unreal, as the boundaries of their lives, so different, so separate, began to blur. Emma's voice trembled. Why, you're really here? He nodded, half-smile tugging at his lips. I told you just this once. And in that moment, the fragile thread of connection they had started to weave pulsed with possibility, uncertainty, and a tension neither of them could yet name. The door creaked open, and Emma felt her heart hammering in her chest. The man who had been a stranger on her phone a few hours ago now stood in her doorway, impossibly tall, impeccably dressed, and radiating a presence that made the small apartment feel even smaller. His sharp gaze swept the room in a fraction of a second, over the worn couch, the scattered toys, the stacks of bills, but his eyes lingered on Noah in his mother's arms. "Hello," he said, his voice calm, controlled. There was no hint of the casual warmth one might expect from a Good Samaritan. Just precision, authority, and something else, buried deep. Emma swallowed hard, straightening her back despite the fatigue etched into her every move. I thank you for coming." Her voice was small but steady. She tried not to let her awe or her nerves show. He stepped inside, pausing only to avoid stepping on the scattered toys. "I assume you're Emma." "Yes," she replied, setting Noah down gently in his bassinet. "And you are James Carlton, right?" He gave a small nod. "Correct. I received your request." His eyes flicked around the room again, briefly taking in the peeling paint on the walls, the empty cupboards, the makeshift crib blanket. The contrast between his world and hers was glaring. His life, full of luxury and order, felt almost unreal compared to the cramped, cluttered space she called home. Emma noticed the way he looked around, and instinctively she felt the need to justify, to defend. I do the best I can. Things have been hard lately, but we manage." Her pride rose to meet his subtle judgment, though she knew he wouldn't say it aloud. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging something more than her words. "I can see that." His tone was neutral, but his eyes softened ever so slightly as they lingered on the photos tacked to the fridge. Some of them faded, showing a younger Emma with a bright, hopeful smile, and one of Noah, asleep in her arms. One photograph in particular caught his attention, a crumpled black and white picture of a little girl clutching a ragged doll, sitting beside a man who looked strikingly like James himself, younger, more vulnerable. His chest tightened. Memories he thought he had buried decades ago, the helplessness, the frustration, the fear of failing someone he loved, surfaced like unwelcome ghosts. He swallowed, forcing his emotions back behind the mask he had honed over years. But the crack in his cold exterior had appeared, subtle but unmistakable. Emma, sensing his pause, hurried to speak. I can pay you back, I swear. As soon as I get my next paycheck, I'll." He held up a hand.
"No."
"That's not necessary, at least not yet." He didn't offer a smile, but the tight line of his lips softened imperceptibly. "Consider it temporary assistance. For now." Her eyes widened. "Temporary," she echoed, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief washing over her.
"Yes."
But his gaze returned to the photograph, then to her tired yet resilient expression. "I'll help more than just this 1 week, but we should be discreet about it. Not openly. Not everyone needs to know." Emma's chest warmed. Relief, gratitude, and the faintest glimmer of hope tangled together. "I thank you. I don't know how to." "You don't need to know how," he interrupted softly. His voice carried a weight, a promise, and a distance all at once. "Just trust me." There was a moment of silence as the sounds of the apartment, the soft hum of the refrigerator, Noah's gentle coos, filled the space between them. Emma sensed the layers beneath his calm, the glimpses of vulnerability he had tried to hide, and for a moment, the distance between their worlds seemed less insurmountable. Then he shifted slightly, eyes catching another detail, a small, folded note taped beneath the kitchen counter, barely visible. Something in his expression tightened, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps caution. Emma noticed it and felt a small tremor of anxiety. Whatever this man carried with him, memories, secrets, pain, it was heavy, and she had touched it, unknowingly, by letting him into her life. "I should go," he said abruptly, masking the emotion in his voice with his usual precision. He glanced at Noah one last time.
"For now."
"I'll return soon." Emma nodded, reluctant to let him leave, her mind already racing with questions, gratitude, and fear. "Wait, you're coming back?" He inclined his head once.
"Yes."
"But there are things you don't know yet. Things I cannot tell anyone." His tone hinted at a deeper secret, something that weighed on him as much as the child in front of him tugged at her heart. As he stepped back toward the door, Emma felt the fragile thread of connection between them stretch taut. A bond had formed, fleeting but undeniable, and both of them sensed that crossing this line would change their lives in ways neither could yet predict. The door closed behind him, leaving Emma alone with Noah, the soft click echoing in the apartment like a heartbeat. Outside, the city continued, indifferent, but inside, a quiet storm had begun. And somewhere in the recesses of James Carlton's mind, a deeper truth waited, one that, if revealed, could shatter the tenuous balance of trust and hope that had just begun to form. James Carlton returned to his penthouse, the city lights stretching beneath him like a glittering sea of indifference. He should have felt relief. He had helped, done his good deed, and moved on. Yet something about the small apartment, the worn toys, the mother clutching her baby with quiet determination, refused to leave his mind. He sank into his leather chair and stared at the framed photograph on his desk. It wasn't recent. It had been taken decades ago, but the memory it held was alive, raw. A little boy, no older than 4, sat in the corner of a shabby room, clutching a tattered blanket. His mother, frail but fierce, hovered nearby, doing her best to make ends meet. He remembered the hunger, the cold nights, the feeling of helplessness gnawing at his chest. And he remembered the night he lost her. His mother had been gone, taken by illness, leaving him alone in a world too big and too indifferent. The resemblance hit him first as a memory flash, then as a physical ache. Emma's struggle mirrored his own past in uncanny ways, the exhaustion in her eyes, the quiet pride in her small apartment, the fierce protection of her child. It was as though he had been given a second chance to witness what he had lost, to intervene where he once could not. And yet he tried to resist. He should stay distant. He had responsibilities, schedules, the carefully controlled life he had built to protect himself from memories like these. His assistants noticed his distracted mood, the way he lingered over minor decisions, his rare moments of uncharacteristic indulgence in thought rather than action. Colleagues whispered about the sudden, inexplicable interest he was taking in charity programs, supply deliveries, and community outreach he had long ignored. But the moment he saw a delivery slip for Emma's apartment, the conflict became tangible. She hadn't asked for more. He had instructed the staff to ensure Noah would not go another day without sufficient formula. When he learned that she had hesitated to accept more than what was needed, citing her pride and sense of obligation, the echo of his own past guilt struck him like a physical blow. He found himself back at her apartment before he could stop himself. The baby was fussing, and Emma was struggling to settle him while juggling laundry and dishes. The sight stabbed at his chest, the same helplessness, the same exhaustion, the same determination to survive. Without thinking, he stepped in, moving with the quiet authority that had been honed over years. He picked up a bottle, prepared it, and handed it to Emma, his voice soft but firm. "Let him drink," he said. "I'll handle this. You shouldn't do it all alone." Emma's eyes widened in surprise and gratitude. I can't accept all this." "You don't have to accept everything," he interrupted gently. "Just let me help where I can." The dynamic between them began to shift subtly. No longer strangers, no longer simply donor and recipient, but two people recognizing parts of themselves in the other. Emma saw him not only as the powerful businessman, but as someone capable of understanding exhaustion, fear, and the small victories that came with surviving another day. And he saw in her not just struggle, but resilience, pride, and humanity. Yet even as their trust deepened, a part of him remained guarded. He couldn't reveal everything. There were pieces of his past too painful to expose. But the threads of connection, once tentative, were tightening, weaving a pattern he couldn't ignore. The shock came subtly, almost imperceptibly. As Emma culled a worn notebook from a drawer, her ledger of expenses, coupons, and receipts, James noticed a name written in careful, almost childlike handwriting. He froze. It was the name of his childhood friend, a girl he had grown up with, lost contact with after his mother died. The coincidence, or fate, was impossible. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice unusually quiet. Emma glanced down.
Oh, that.
"My friend gave me this notebook a long time ago. I didn't know it had names in it. It was just notes from people I used to know." But James knew. The name, the handwriting, the memory, it wasn't a mistake. Something connected their pasts, a thread neither of them had expected. A shocking truth had emerged, one that promised to upend everything they thought they understood about coincidence, chance, and the invisible threads that tied people together. He leaned back, fighting to mask the surge of emotion, the ache of recognition, and the weight of history pressing down on him. The realization that Emma's life, so fragile, so desperate, somehow intersected with his own childhood, was more than coincidence. It was a signal that the story between them, whatever it was to become, had only just begun. And for the first time in years, James Carlton felt the fragile stirrings of something he hadn't felt in decades: hope. Emma sat on the couch, cradling Noah in her arms, her heart hammering in panic. His tiny forehead was hot, and the shallow rise and fall of his chest made her stomach twist with fear. The pediatrician had told her to bring him in immediately, but she had no car, no money for an urgent visit, and the taxi fare alone was more than she could spare. Every second that passed felt heavier than the last. Her phone buzzed James. Her stomach sank.
Was he checking in?
Or worse, questioning why she couldn't manage? She hesitated, then answered, the urgency in her voice palpable. "He's sick. I don't know what to do." Within minutes, James appeared at her door. The sleek car, the tailored suit, the sharp presence, it all felt surreal in her cramped, cluttered apartment. But this time, there was no hesitation. He scooped Noah gently, checking his temperature, whispering soothing words. Emma watched, her chest tight with a mix of awe and relief, but also pride. She hated feeling helpless. "You should have called sooner," he said, his voice soft but firm. "We'll get him the help he needs. Don't worry about anything else right now." Emma shook her head. "No, I can't burden you with—" "Stop," he interrupted, eyes meeting hers. "This isn't about burdening me. It's about doing the right thing." The moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. It was the building manager, holding a notice. Emma's stomach dropped further. Eviction. The rent was overdue, and the notice was final. She looked at James, panic and shame warring on her face. "Emma," James said carefully, taking the notice from her hands. "We'll handle this. For now, focus on Noah." The weight of reality pressed down on her. Pride screamed at her to refuse his help, to stand on her own, to keep her dignity intact. But the raw desperation in her heart, the need to protect her son, won. She nodded reluctantly, tears welling up. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." James paused. His mind raced with the duality of his life, the image he maintained in public, untouchable and composed, versus the empathy he felt stirring within him for this mother and child. His reputation, his board, the press, they would all question a billionaire bending rules, helping someone personally. And yet, seeing Noah's fevered brow, hearing Emma's strained voice, he felt compelled. He couldn't turn away. "I'll tell you something," he said, settling beside her on the couch. "Something I've never told anyone." His voice dropped, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath the controlled exterior. I lost someone when I was your son's age. My mother, she got sick. I couldn't help her. I couldn't do anything. And I've carried that helplessness with me ever since. I've built walls, a life that keeps me in control, but it's never protected me from the past." Emma's hand brushed his. I understand," she whispered. "I can't lose him. I can't. I have to do whatever it takes to protect him." James felt a crack open wider in his chest, a mix of empathy, grief, and recognition. Here was Emma, mirroring the fear and determination he had felt decades ago, only now he could intervene. He could act where his younger self could not. A tense silence hung between them. The gravity of their respective choices, his balance between reputation and compassion, hers between pride and survival, pressed on the room. Then, without hesitation, James made his decision. "Listen," he said firmly, yet with a softness reserved for the most vulnerable moments. "We're going to handle this. Noah gets the care he needs, your apartment stays, and no one else will interfere. But you have to trust me. Fully. I can't let this wait any longer." Emma nodded, the tightness in her chest loosening just enough to let relief seep through. The fear hadn't vanished entirely, but there was a flicker of hope, fragile yet undeniable. For the first time, their relationship transcended stranger and benefactor. They were two people bound by shared vulnerability, trust, and a recognition of past pain. The bond between them had deepened in ways neither could ignore, yet neither could define fully. There was no romance yet, no declarations, only the raw, grounding truth of connection born in crisis. As James prepared to leave, his phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen that made him pause, eyes narrowing. The sender was unknown, the content brief. "We know what you've done, and now it's going to cost you." He looked at Emma, who met his gaze with unspoken questions. His jaw tightened. The crisis had escalated, the stakes higher than either of them had imagined. And in that instant, James knew the choice he was about to make would not just affect him, but the fragile life of the mother and child he had come to protect. A heavy silence fell, broken only by Noah's soft breathing, as the storm of consequences loomed on the horizon. The sound of Noah's soft coos filled the apartment, and for the first time in days, Emma allowed herself to breathe without fear. James Carlton stood quietly in the doorway, surveying the small living room as if measuring the invisible weight that had been lifted. The eviction notice had been rescinded, medical bills covered discreetly, and supplies stacked neatly in the corner. All without fanfare, all without drawing attention. Emma sank to the couch, clutching Noah to her chest, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. The sheer magnitude of what had happened, the impossibility of it, crashed over her in waves. She had expected help, yes, but not like this. Not the kind that erased weeks of fear and struggle in a single afternoon. I don't know what to say, she whispered, voice trembling. I can't possibly repay you for this." James shook his head gently. "You don't need to. You've done nothing wrong. And honestly, it's not about repayment. You and Noah deserve a chance to breathe without constant fear." Her hands tightened around Noah, emotions racking her frame. "But you've given me everything. This is too much. I can't accept all of it." He knelt beside her, his expression softening. "Then don't think of it as accepting everything. Think of it as letting someone care. There's strength in receiving help when it's needed. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Emma's sobs quieted, replaced by a sense of awe and disbelief. For so long, she had carried the weight of the world alone. Pride had been both her armor and her prison. Now, that armor was no longer necessary. Not in this room, not with this man who had entered her life unexpectedly, quietly, and decisively. "Thank you," she whispered again, almost to herself. But this time, her gratitude was deeper, layered with recognition of the significance of his actions, not just the practical help, but the understanding and respect he had offered along with it. James glanced at Noah, who gurgled happily, a tiny hand reaching toward him. A warmth spread through him, one that wasn't tied to his wealth, his power, or his reputation. It was tied to trust, to vulnerability, to the quiet miracle of seeing someone survive, flourish, and be safe because of him. "You've changed things for me, James," Emma said after a long pause, still holding Noah close. "Not just the bills, not just the formula, but the way I see my life now. I can start over. I can breathe. I can hope." James nodded, feeling an unfamiliar lightness in his chest. He had always believed that wealth could solve problems, that control could protect people, but this moment reminded him that compassion, timing, and connection were infinitely more powerful. She looked at him, determination in her eyes. "I want to repay you, not with money. But I will. I'll pay it forward." I'll help someone else, someone in need, when I can. That's how I'll honor this. He smiled faintly, a rare, unguarded expression. That's all I ask. And I think you'll do more than that. You have more strength than you realize. The atmosphere shifted subtly. A bond had formed not through obligation, not through power, but through shared humanity. Emma had been saved, yes, but she had also unknowingly changed him. His past grief, his walls, the isolation he had maintained for years, they were softening. Seeing her courage and resilience reminded him of what truly mattered beyond boardrooms and contracts: people, lives, and the ripple effect of genuine kindness. Then Emma, almost shyly, handed him a small, neatly wrapped package. Inside was a handmade blanket, soft and colorful, crafted for Noah. It wasn't wealth or grandeur, it was time, thought, and care. Something tangible that spoke volumes more than money ever could. James accepted it silently, touched in a way that no corporate accolade or recognition ever had. As he prepared to leave, he looked around the apartment one last time. The space no longer felt small, cluttered, or hopeless. It felt alive, with laughter, warmth, and possibility. And in that moment, he realized that the act of helping had created a new beginning not only for Emma and Noah, but for himself as well. Stepping outside, he took a deep breath, the city stretching before him, indifferent and chaotic. Yet something had shifted. A simple act of kindness had created ripples, bridging worlds, healing wounds, and planting seeds for the future. He glanced back once, seeing Emma smiling at Noah, the glow of hope radiating from the small room, and he felt a profound truth settle within him: that wealth was only meaningful when it could touch lives in ways money alone could never achieve. The moral echoed quietly in his mind as he walked away. True power lies not in possession, but in compassion. True legacy is measured not by wealth, but by the lives one uplifts. And as Emma pressed Noah to her chest, breathing in the quiet miracle of the moment, she realized something too: that one person's kindness could change everything, not just for the recipient, but for the giver as well. Outside, the city lights sparkled, cinematic and endless, reflecting the possibilities of new beginnings, of lives intertwined, lessons learned, and the quiet but unstoppable power of empathy.